Purple Daily. Meat and potatoes. Not just a deep dive. It's the deepest dive into Minnesota Vikings football.
And so much to come. Zulgad, AJ Fredrickson, Tyler Forness, who you can find covers the Vikings, does a great job at A to Z Sports. And gentlemen, today we are going to get into several topics, especially with the Vikings at 3-0, coming off a great game. We're going to talk about how Jonathan Greenard and Andrew Van Ginkel have combined to give the Vikings an edge room that is pretty damn good. We are going to start off with, though, the masterful Kevin O'Connell, the magician coach, the illusion of complexity, and explain that. But before we do, I want to give a shout out to the exclusive personal injury law firm of this show, Nicolay Law. Nicolay Law knows that when you or a loved one gets injured, ordinary life can come to a stop and things can get complicated. During that time, insurance companies, they are likely to pressure you. They don't care if you get better. They don't care if your bills are piling up, and they don't care that you may not be able to work. But Nicolay Law, Russ right there, he cares. They've seen every play the insurance companies have, and they'll go the whole 9 yards to make sure you get the compensation you deserve after an accident. So if you have been injured, go to that guy right there. Get Minnesota's local award-winning injury lawyers. That means you need to get Nicolay. Start your path to winning at Nicolay.com. That's Nicolet, Nicolet, NicolayLaw.com, or give them a call, 1-855-Nicolay. All right, gentlemen, Vikings 3-0. They start against the Giants, and it's a great performance, and we're all like, okay, that's the Giants, though. Let's see. San Francisco, which, by the way, now is decimated. They were banged up. I would not call the team that came here in week 2 decimated. The Vikings beat them basically playing the Niners game. That was impressive. And then the defending AFC South champion Houston Texans, who have gone from a dumpster fire a few years back to a really good team, come to town. They also want to kick your butt. And the Vikings don't just beat them. They beat them convincingly. Biggest win in O'Connell in his 3 years here. And Forno, I want to get to you with this. So you sent me a text last night that you had found a perfect example of something Kevin O'Connell talked about in his first press conference here, which was, I want to call plays. I want to have an offense that utilizes what he called the illusion of complexity. So take us through the play. Age is going to roll the tape, but take us through what the illusion of complexity on the Aaron Jones touchdown from Sam Darnold really meant.
So the concept you're looking at is what's called mesh rail. It's a very simple concept. It's air raid in its basis, but almost every single offense has a version of this. So essentially, the whole concept of mesh is you're going to have two shallow drags, which is, if you're watching on the YouTube copy, it's going to be much easier to understand. The Y, which is at tight end, and then the slot receiver, they're going to cross. And then what we're going to see is a flip version of this. So the X receiver is going to run like a clear out route. Sometimes it's an out like it's shown here. Sometimes it's a go. Sometimes it's a post. The only thing it's not is a dig route where you're going inside, because you have the Z receiver who's running that stop route behind the mesh point. So the whole idea of this is to create traffic in the middle of the field. And you want to spring the running back on that rail route. So if you hit the rail route when it's open, as you see Jefferson is lined up here, the idea is to throw that first. And having Jefferson in the backfield, so they did a really quick snap here, and that causes a lot of confusion. And because Jefferson's back there, they're trying to figure out, we can't have a linebacker on Jefferson, even though he's in the backfield. And that theoretically springs Jones on the crosser here. So you can kind of see as the clip is rolling, Jefferson's going to run that rail route. Jones is going to come into wide open space. Yep. So the idea is you want to hit the rail first. That's your first read. The second read is Jones. Jones catches it, easy money. And the idea of mesh is just to create advantageous matchups because there's a lot of traffic in there. Johnny Munt, it absolutely blocks out the guy following Jones.
He sort of picks him, yeah.
Yeah, it's a legal pick because he's running a route. Yep. And Jones got called for running a pick on his own earlier in the game, but he didn't really sell it.
Right.
And
because he stuck his butt out.
Yeah, you got to sell it. You got to keep going.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing, like mesh rail is a concept that everybody runs.
Right.
It fits in almost every offense. And by putting Jefferson in the tailback spot, that gives you the illusion of complexity. It takes something very simple, something that everybody runs, and you're adding a wrinkle to it to be able to create a lot of open space. Because you know what? If they don't adjust quick enough because it's a quick snap and you have a linebacker on Jefferson, that's wide open for a touchdown.
So,
but because go ahead, John.
What do you think? So to go back to the phrase, what do you think the Texans are thinking when it comes to the word complexity then? So like they see that defensively. What's going through their mind as far as what could take place? What are they also trying to guard against that the Vikings have no intention of trying to run, do you think?
Honestly, they're just at that point, they're just trying to make sure that an inside linebacker isn't covering Justin Jefferson, because when you're thinking on defense, you're losing. So by doing that quick snap, they have to figure out, because standard protocol is you're either going to have a box safety or a linebacker on that running back. You're not going to have a corner. So by putting Jefferson in the backfield, all of a sudden a corner now has to figure out, okay, I'm in the backfield. So where does this linebacker go? You have to then go find Aaron Jones. Well, Jones is on the other side of the field, and it creates like those little intricacies. And you can see the defender that's covering Jones is sprinting up there at the snap to try and get there. And then he gets absolutely pulverized by Johnny Munt in the mesh.
Right.
It's those little nuanced details. If you run mesh rail, like, who cares? Everybody runs mesh rail, but that little tidbit of Jefferson in the backfield running that rail route creates that little extra confusion, gets Jones wide open. So what we call this wide ass open. There's nobody within 5 yards of him.
Right.
If you can create that kind of thing in the National Football League, that is very, very impressive play calling, because that is something that does not happen. Wide ass open in the NFL is if you have 2 yards of separation.
Right.
In college, it's going to look way different because hash marks are 22 inches wider. 22 feet wider. Yeah, maybe it's yards. I don't know. They're significantly wider.
Right.
And the spacing rules are different. The caliber of athlete is different. But if you get that kind of open in the NFL, that's brilliance by your play caller, because they're making things easy. And if you can make things easy for your quarterback, especially in today's day where defenses are starting to take over a little bit, it makes a massive difference at the end of the game.
But the absolute key that I see there is this as well. You can split the running back out wide, but if he is not a credible threat, it doesn't matter. So like that's where the Jones acquisition to me becomes so important, because you can't ignore him. Like he is a threat. Not to belabor a point or try to be mean here, but if you had done this 2023, Madison goes out wide right, I'm guessing that the concern there is not nearly as great as it becomes with Jones. So to me, it's a two-pronged thing. One is, yes, O'Connell is very good. In fact, I said on another episode of PD today that I would put him currently among the top 3 play callers in the entire league. So he is very, very good. But I also think the fact that the Vikings finally have personnel to actually sell it as, hey, Justin Jefferson's a huge threat here. We all know that. But we actually have a running back now split out wide right. And if you ignore him, there's going to be an enormous price to pay. And what's interesting about this is, explain this one. Where do you think that concept goes from here? Because now you put this on tape, right? And teams are going to see it, and teams are going to say, okay, that's that's what they're going to do. The great play callers say, that's what we did then. This is what we're going to do now. What else do you think, Forno, that you can run off of this action?
So I'm going to kind of go in a little bit of a different direction to kind of just explain some of the little things that Kevin O'Connell does, and then we'll kind of get back to it. So one of the things I love watching about film, and I posted a clip earlier, everybody runs this concept called dagger. You have the inside receiver running a go route or a post, the outside receiver running a dig behind it. It was the same route concept that absolutely destroyed the Vikings at the end of last year. It's a weakness of Tampa 2, one of the staple coverages that Brian Flores likes to run. If you can pepper in that dig, it's game over. You can just keep peppering it in. So you have to kind of vary your coverages. You can't just run the same thing all the time. Well, dagger is a staple in what Kevin O'Connell likes to do. And I love trying to figure out how many different ways he can get to it. because it's fascinating. And one of the ways that he got to it in this game, he likes to run that jet motion where you have your wide receiver, tight end, or running back running basically right behind where the quarterback is under center. Sometimes it's a jet sweep. A lot of times it's a fake. Sometimes they will do the split zone action where you have a guy on one side and then he runs to the other side to be a blocker, like almost like a backside blocker. So you can run a lot of different things with it. Well, he kept running this jet motion, and he would have Jalen Nailor run it, and then he'd be the guy. So I just love watching how many different ways he can get to it because he's got a lot. And the reason I bring this up is because he kept running that jet motion with Nailor. That's why the fourth down worked, because he did not run a single instance of jet motion with a jet sweep. So he runs a jet sweep on 4th and 1, easy 3 yards, first down. And he always has something in his bag to utilize to make things easier for him and to keep the defense on their toes. He does not have a lot of play calls. He has like I think you're going to have like 12 to 15 different passing concepts, but he's probably got 200 ways of getting to them. And that is the illusion of complexity. It's very simple concepts that, hey, we're going to just line up slightly differently and boom. So when you're getting the play call, it's like, here's the formation and then here are the concepts. That theoretically, that's not too hard, right? So what I think he's going to end up doing with this is you're going to have Jefferson in the backfield. And then maybe you run mesh rail with him one or two more times, really sell that home. And then maybe the next time, and they did this against the New York Giants for that touchdown, where they faked the screen to Jefferson on that orbit motion. So orbit motion, think that really wide motion that almost looks like they're orbiting the earth. That's why it's called orbit motion. And then Jalen Nailor fakes the block from the slot, runs a wheel route, touchdown. So I think they're going to have Jefferson in that spot a few more times this year. And they're going to do that orbit motion. And then maybe they use that and almost run like a backside wheel route or fake the screen. They're going to have more counters to this because they're not just going to run the same couple concepts. They're going to have some creative stuff. Maybe we see like a reverse pass. Maybe we see him actually like get like a pitch and then he gets to run the ball. He's got something creative. I'm not quite sure what it is yet, but there's something in the bag.
Now, let me ask you this, Forno, because as I throw up the mesh rail kind of diagram here once again, this is something that I think, like, even if you've never played football before, you've played maybe a Madden or something, you've seen this play diagram. You know what this is, and this is somewhat simple for most people to understand. But is this kind of like complexity of mixing and matching, throwing guys in that what would be, normally the running back's slot, where now you're saying they're replacing that with Justin Jefferson for that illusion of complexity? How many of those types of formations can they realistically go to the line and have these type of mixing and matching where all of a sudden Jefferson's now on the left, maybe he's in the backfield, Aaron Jones is up in one of the wide receiver slots? Realistically, can you do that with everything, or is there some that maybe it favors more so?
I think the answer is kind of a little bit in both piles. I don't think you can make every single concept super complex. Sometimes you need Jefferson in certain spots to really draw the coverage to make things a little bit easier. Like if you had Jefferson running a clear out, and then Nailor's running that dig, which I talked about that jet motion with Nailor running the dig. Jefferson's running the clear out, so he's going to draw more attention. That's going to make it inherently easier to hit the dig. So I think there are instances where you can have Jefferson as a decoy. You can have Jefferson as the guy that you want to draw attention with to make things easier for everybody else. But I also think that you can design some of the stuff for Jefferson to just get the ball. Jefferson is your best football player. One of the things, I remember the days of Percy Harvin. So I think everybody here knows by now I'm a huge Florida Gator fan. The way that they used Percy Harvin in Florida and then the way they used him in Minnesota, you just found ways to get him the ball and get him in spots to be able to be successful with it. And eventually you can utilize some of that as a decoy because you know that he's that dangerous with the ball. In sense, hell, before Adrian Peterson was MVP in 2012, it looked like he was going to be Percy Harvin because of the kind of season that he was having. So if you continue to do different things with Jefferson, you can eventually use everything as either a decoy or the number one option. because he's just that good and he's going to draw attention. But if you keep peppering in Jalen Naylor with the dig and you keep selling that, well, guess what? Jefferson's probably going to end up being open with one-on-one coverage at some point, taking the ball vertically. Right. And the one thing with play calling, everybody has tendencies. There is not a single person in the world that does not have a tendency when it comes to calling plays. It's third down. Oh, they like to run this concept. Oh, it's second and long. Well, Mike Zimmer's going to run the football. Like, there are always tendencies. So as a play caller, you like to be able to self-scout. A lot of the self-scouting is done during the bye week. But you self-scout to be like, okay, here are my tendencies, and be intentional with it. So I think there's a lot in kind of both sides of that bucket, AJ, because you don't want to be super predictable and you want to have counter punches for what the defense throws at you.
Absolutely. Let's go to a second topic, which is, through 2 games, statistically, Van Ginkel was going great guns. And I think there was a lot of folks, because Greenard in week 2 sort of backed into a sack. And there were a lot of folks saying, Greenard, he's doing okay, but where are the sacks? We are now 3 weeks in. Greenard, playing against his former Houston team, had 3 sacks on Sunday. Van Ginkel continues to play great. It was funny that the Greenard's great game came against the Houston Texans, who now, of course, have Danielle Hunter, who did not have a sack on Sunday, on his side. Forno, I want to ask you about this. When you watch the film, and heck, just the games, how much do you see that from a personnel standpoint, from a fit standpoint, that this edge rushing room, which didn't have Dallas Turner on Sunday, I think he might play against the Packers, but that this room has now become what I would just say is this, a far more complete room that can do what Flores wants. And, I think it's also now, for the first time in a long time, it's a pick your poison, right? Like, if we're going to stop Van Ginkel, Greenard's going to have a good game. If we're going to stop Greenard, how much of a step forward, even with Danielle gone, do you think that this edge room has taken?
So this edge room is really interesting. And I want to start here. When you talk about Danielle Hunter last year, I think Danielle Hunter is a better overall player than anybody that the Vikings have currently on defense. I also think it's inarguable that he wasn't a great fit for how Brian Flores wanted to play defense. And I think that manifested itself over time, especially with the Marcus Davenport injury that ended up knocking him out for pretty much the entire year. And unfortunately, he just had another one of those with Detroit, torn triceps out for the year. That guy just can't catch a break, but he's incredibly talented and a unique specimen because of his size and athletic profile. He's got height, he's got length, he's got weight, and he's got explosiveness. So the idea of bringing in Davenport, I will fight tooth and nail that it was a great idea. It didn't work. You move on. It happens.
Right.
But by bringing in Greenard, Van Ginkel, Dallas Turner, Jihad Ward, and then you have Pat Jones, who's playing out of his mind right now. You have all of these players. The one thing that they could do with Danielle Hunter is, all right, we're just going to stop you from doing anything because we're not scared of DJ Wanham. Last year, they weren't scared of Pat Jones, and they shouldn't have been. So the idea of last year's defense was to try and get Danielle Hunter one-on-one matchups. And if you could get Danielle Hunter one-on-one, you had a real chance to be able to impact the game. That was also some of the reason why at the end of the year, you had offenses just being able to destroy you on those dagger concepts and kill Tampa 2. And the Vikings had to blitz a lot because they just did not have enough guys they could trust to get pressure. That's different this year. If you just go double Greenard, Van Ginkel's going to kill you, or Jihad Ward, or Pat Jones, or when he comes back, Dallas Turner. There are multiple pieces that can get to the quarterback. So you can't just have focus on one guy. You have to focus on a multitude of guys. And because they're using this Hawk package with 4 edge rushers, guess what? Now they can stunt you to hell. And you have a looper who runs a 4.6 40 instead of a 5.1 40. And that kind of speed and quickness is a massive difference because you're talking about tenths of a second mattering when it comes to pressuring the quarterback. Tenths of a second don't matter a whole lot in a lot of different phases of life and athletics. They do when you're trying to pressure the quarterback because that time to throw 2.6 seconds to 2.8 seconds is a significant amount of time. And you have Greenard, you have Van Ginkel. They can both do a multitude of things because people don't necessarily remember. In college, Van Ginkel was not a pass rushing style linebacker. He was an off-ball guy. he was really good at blitzing and he could rush the passer, but he was used as an off-ball guy. So he's got experience in that facet. He's got experience as an edge rusher and a blitzer in this scheme. And you have Greenard, who's an edge rusher, but with 35.5-inch arms in that length, you see him on the interior. He can just own guys. One of the reasons why Jon Jones is considered the best MMA fighter of all time is because he could make the 205-pound weight limit at 6'4" with the reach advantage over some guys where it would be like 11 inches. That's like a sixth grade bully playing with a first grader. There's just such a disparity where it's like, oh, I can just put my hand on your head and you can't do anything because you can't reach me. Like Greenard has some of that to his game because of the 94th percentile arm length at 35.5 inches. An average guard's can have like 32.5-inch arms. 3 inches matters a significant amount when you're trying to rush the passer on the interior. So he's getting his hands on guys and they can't really do anything. So Greenard is kind of having his way. Like those things matter. And then you have Van Ginkel, who can do a little bit of everything. He can rush around the edge. He can be that looper. He can be just a traditional blitzer off the ball. Whatever you need these guys to do, they can do it. Greenard at 6'5", 270 with that arm length can be a stand-up edge rusher. Hell, I don't know what in the world the Texans were thinking. Judd, there were multiple times, and he got a sack off of one of them, where they had him on a tight end.
Yeah,
you have Laramie Tunsil. What are you doing?
He was pissed about that too.
Oh, he should be pissed. That's so disrespectful.
Well.
Now, if it's Josh Oliver, where Josh Oliver kind of blocks like a tackle,
right.
Okay. You know what?
On the one sack, the tight end got he was like sent to Owatonna.
Oh, he was destroyed into the shadow realm. It was bad.
I know.
Kate Stover, I think, is going to be a solid tight end in the National Football League.
Yeah,
he's also a 4th-round rookie. Yeah. And you have Laramie Tunsil on that side, and you still have a tight end being the sole responsibility to block. It wasn't a chip. It was, this is your guy. What are you doing?
Yeah.
And that happened like 4 times in the first half. That's malpractice. That is asking to lose a football game, and they did. They didn't just lose. They got embarrassed.
Right.
And
butt whooped.
You can't have a tight end being solely responsible for the best pass rusher on the other team. Now, we're not talking a DJ Wadham level player. I'd put Greenard in the top 15, top 20 edge rushers. I don't think he's quite top 10. I had that discussion with some people who are smarter than me earlier today. But Greenard is inching his way up there because of how well he's playing, how he's using his physical gifts, and how he's finishing. And hell, in the run game, Judd, when they're running zone, he had one of these plays that I posted it on Twitter last week, where he's inside, he's like in the C gap between Trent Williams and the tight end. He crosses Trent Williams' face and gets a tackle for loss inside the 5-yard line. It's bonkers how quick this guy is off the ball, and it's a weapon. Mm-hmm. That Brian Flores is going to weaponize Jonathan Greenard consistently throughout the entire year. He had another one in the first quarter of this game where, and I just posted it, I don't know, we're recording this at 12:30. I posted about an hour and a half ago. Mm-hmm. He just gets in there and he barely misses the tackle, but he gets his feet on the legs of Cam Akers. Like, you're asking this guy to do a lot of different things, and he can do all of them. The versatility and intelligence are the 2 key factors of this defense, Judd. There is not one player on this defense who can only do one thing.
Yes.
Except for maybe Jonathan Bullard, but he's a very, very good run defender.
Right.
And like, that's the caveat. So when we go into the NFL draft, which we'll talk about a lot moving forward, they're going to prioritize people who can do multiple things. I thought LSU's Harold Perkins, who's like he's a 6'1", 220-pound linebacker that's best as a pass rusher, but he's way too small to be an edge. Like that's the kind of guy you could have him as a pass rusher, off-ball linebacker, or like an overhang safety a la Josh Metellus. You could ask him to do all those things. That sounds like a Brian Flores kind of guy, right? Like that's kind of what we're looking for. That's what they prioritize on this defense. And you see it with Greenard. You see it with Van Ginkel. And you're going to get it with Dallas Turner, who's compared to Dante Hightower by Nick Saban and Brian Flores.
Right.
Saban, other than Bill Belichick, is probably the smartest defensive mind we've seen in the past 25, 30 years in the National Football League. He's brilliant. Mm-hmm. and he knows how to get the most out of these guys. But the rare movement skills paired with the size and length that he has, you're going to see a lot of interesting things with Dallas Turner.
Is that versatility for Brian Flores one of the reasons why, like looking at it from zoomed out week to week basis, it seems like it was the Andrew Van Ginkel show, like week 1. And then you saw maybe Blake Cashman shine in week 2. And now Jonathan Greenard, he had that amazing game on Sunday. With that kind of versatility, is that where it's just like he walks in, hey, you're going to be the guy today. You're going to have to step up and you're in that kind of prime role? Or is it just, that's just how the matches have been where some guys are able to shine a little bit more because of the weaknesses on the other team's offense?
If I may quick though, to what
absolutely.
Tyler's saying though, like the one thing is, and this is the thing that has to be judged pre-draft, obviously, is the intelligence is huge. Like you cannot take a guy, you can't make anyone do this. Like Josh Metellus, 6th round pick, right? 6th round pick. Okay, that's fine. Sort of, played special teams here. He was okay. And then B-Flow shows up and he's like, hold on a second here. And he asked him, and I still go back to minicamp, OTAs, spring of 23. And all of a sudden, Josh Metellus is doing all of this stuff. And you're like, what the hell is this? His football IQ is huge. I was talking to him last week in the locker room, and I said, what's the football IQ here? Like, just from a defensive standpoint. And he said, it's off the charts. Harrison Smith, Bynum, Metellus, Gilmore. Stephon Gilmore has basically came off the street and is doing multiple things. So I think the ask is great, and I love the system, but there's a bunch of reasons why they cut Scene at the end of the day. And one of them is because he couldn't comprehend what they want. He's not that type of player. So intelligence here, it takes 2 things. 1, yes, you got to be a hell of an athlete, but 2, you got to comprehend this. And this is, and we are talking a Harvard Law School type defense here, Forno.
So there's a couple different factors. I want to elaborate on what you just said, Judd. There is a level of intelligence that can overcome athleticism. Like, absolutely no offense to Josh Metellus. He's an average-ish athlete for what he plays.
Sure.
But he is so smart that it doesn't matter. He can get to a spot because he's smarter than you. And that kind of intelligence and to be able to think and react that quickly can overcome somebody who maybe doesn't have elite level burst in athleticism. Like, think about Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning is arguably the smartest player to ever play football. Like, and anybody who you've ever talked to will that has been around Peyton Manning will say he's incredibly smart. Peyton Manning had an average arm. He had no athleticism. You know why it didn't matter? He was way smarter than you. He knew exactly what you were going to do before you did it. And he had a very quick release and really good mechanics to be able to make it happen. Like, you watch some of those throws from his early days, he throws an ugly football.
Well,
but none of it mattered because he was way smarter.
End?
Well,
the Broncos years, I was begging him to retire. I didn't want to watch those Ducks, and he won a Super Bowl or went to a Super Bowl.
Last year was awful.
It was,
but that first Bronco year is one of the best quarterback years we've ever seen.
I know, but it still was like, oh my God, that football's going to make it, huh? But yes, you're right.
But that's
your
what I
point
mean.
is well taken. Your point's well taken.
When you are not a super athlete, when that athleticism starts to go, it's way worse.
Yes.
It is way worse. Like Tom Brady, people don't give him credit for it. Tom Brady had a rocket. He had a huge arm. And that arm started to kind of dissipate a little bit into his 40s, but it never fully cratered. Sure. So he was always able to really rifle them in there. And you know what? Kudos to him for being able to still do it at the age of 45. Like he defied father time more than I think anybody else that we've ever seen. Except for probably Jaromir Jagr, which you can elaborate more on that if you want.
But football-wise, football-wise, I think you're right. I think you're 100% right.
But if you have that kind of intelligence, you can overcome some of the athletic shortcomings. That's not to say Metellus isn't an athlete. He absolutely is. He plays in the NFL in a position that relies on speed and athleticism. But right. He's nowhere near the athlete that Lewis Cine was. But his intelligence and understanding and mind for the game is at such a high level from what we see on film that those little nuanced details do not matter. And they're going to matter at some point, probably when he's like 35. And I think he's the kind of guy where things may just fall off a cliff because he doesn't have elite athletic traits to fall back on. But man, if you have a PhD in this defense, it says something. And then to follow up with AJ's comment on Stephon Gilmore. Gilmore's already played it with Brian Flores. He understands Brian Flores. He's played a significant amount of his career in the Brian Flores tree. So Bill Belichick-ish stuff. And he's played in so many kind of schemes around the league where all he has to do is come in. All right, Brian, what kind of stuff are you running? Oh, all right, cool. Read the playbook for a few days. All right, I got it. Like, he's got a level of football intelligence and football IQ from all of his time across the league. You're not asking him to come in and, oh, I ran the air raid in college. Oh, now I have to learn the West Coast offense. He's already ran this kind of stuff. So I do think it's impressive, but I'm going to be real. I expected this. I didn't expect him to come in here and do anything but because of his past and his track record.
He's better than I thought at this age, though. Like
I'm going to be honest. This is exactly what I thought. How he played this well in Dallas last year.
Yeah, but I wasn't sure. He turned. I think he turned 34 last week. So I'm just saying. I think at the end of the day, we're both saying the same thing, which is these guys deserve a ton of praise. Yes. And it's really. I mean, you could probably go through at least the starters, if not more, on defense right now, and you could probably have a handful, if not more, of potential down the road coordinators / position coaches, like guys that understand it. I mean, speaking of drop-offs, Harrison Smith, he ain't no spring chicken, but what's he doing? Making plays. The one thing that I looked up from a snap count too is this. Interesting. Harrison Smith, and keep in mind, off season, they basically said, we're going to bring his snaps down. Like, we played him a ton last year, and then he played 68 of 71 snaps against the Giants, and B-Flow was like, I don't really like it when he's not playing, though. So in week 2, 65 of 70. So 96% of the snaps against the Giants, 93% of the snaps against the Niners. On Sunday, 78%, 52 of 67 snaps. And so if you go through, they actually are changing things up. And I think some is based on age, but I also think that it just goes to show you too how intricate this system is and who they play. On Sunday, Bynum, Metellus, 67 of 67 snaps. So this to me is one of the most interesting things I've seen because of the nuance, intricacies, and the amount of guys that they feel comfortable playing.
So I'm going to be real with you, Judd. I don't think they're changing Harrison Smith's snaps at all. Let me tell you why. He didn't play at all that last drive. It was all garbage time. If that wasn't garbage time, are you telling me that Smith wouldn't have played? I think we're in a position, and Brian Flores said it, I think it was last week, where he's like, yeah, we had a plan last year to get Harrison Smith.
He did. That's what he said for week
snaps.
1.
That didn't work. And I think we're in the same spot here. I think if the game was anywhere in doubt, Smith would have been playing. Yeah. So I do think it's a good idea to kind of take him off the field. And, Dale Jackson's a starting caliber player. He's not Harrison Smith, but he's proven that he is a starting level safety for this team.
Right.
Get him in for take like a drive or hey, rotate him in for 4 plays here and there. You don't have to do a lot. Smith is really valuable, but Jackson's a good player. And if you're going to make this kind of run, which I know we're all talking about it, the Vikings could potentially make a deep playoff run at this point. Get him some rest here and there.
Yep.
Because you know what? He may be 35. He may be Harrison Smith, but age catches up to you. And a 35-year-old body is going to absorb all that physical pain and punishment a lot worse than somebody who's 25. And I think having somebody who's being willing to say, hey, we're going to take you off the field just, 10 plays a game. It's not even a lot. 10 out of an average of 70.
Yep.
That's going to make a difference at the end of the year.
And that's what they did on Sunday as well. Gilmore played 45 of 67 snaps. And when they played 2 boundary corners, they took Gilmore off the field quite a bit. And this starts in the first half, and used Griffin and Murphy. And so they are definitely like, there's definitely some attempt here because I mean, I think Gilmore is justified playing, the majority of the snaps, but they were definitely trying to play Shaq more, first of all. But I think they're trying to get a guy like Gilmore, who, as I mentioned, just turned 34, some more rest. So like this is just it's an advanced level defense class. Let's move on to what should we be watching from a Viking standpoint this weekend in college football. What piques your curiosity as far as the college game and potentially guys that we can watch for, as you talked about, the draft and the Vikings might have an eye on?
I'm just going to be simple. Go watch Alabama versus Georgia. Do whatever you can to
Don't get
sit
too
your
drunk.
butt.
Because they
No,
will.
that was me. That was me last weekend, Judd. Give me some good old schlitzes.
Oh, man, you were down in the Schlitz.
Oh, hey, shout out to my mother-in-law for finding those in Deadwood and bringing them out to me just because I made it. I said that Schlitz memorabilia was
your first
rules.
tailgate. Your first tailgate. You got to do what you got to do.
Hey, it was a good time. But let me tell you, I paid for it on Sunday. I am not 21 anymore. Let me tell you. But just watch Georgia and Alabama. The slate isn't necessarily the greatest next weekend. Georgia, Alabama is going to feel like a national championship game. It's going to feel like a really, really big deal. It's 2 versus 4, and you're going to see a lot of pro-level prospects. You're going to see 2 quarterbacks who could potentially go in the first round next year. You're going to see a running back for Georgia and Trevor Etienne, who could potentially be like a top 50 pick. I still can't believe he transferred from Florida to Georgia. It still breaks my heart. But you're just going to see a bunch of dudes.
Get used to it, portal boy.
Yeah, I don't get me started on Florida. I'll rant for 2 hours. But
it's not
honestly,
Gator Daily. It's not Gator. It's Purple Daily.
Hey, I'll make it Gator Daily. But Alabama versus Georgia.
We'll shut the show down.
Alabama versus Georgia is the one game you're going to want to watch. It's going to give you everything. But keep an eye on all these running backs. I mean, we saw it on Saturday. Caleb Johnson for Iowa absolutely torched the Gophers' run defense. Like, Iowa couldn't pass the ball. Cade McNamara is bad, and you let them run for like 300 yards against you. Like, you should be ashamed of yourselves. But Caleb Johnson's a talented player. He could end up coming out in the draft. There are so many good running backs, Judd, and running backs are becoming a more valuable asset. Not necessarily we're going to pay them $15 million a year kind of asset, but it's becoming clearer that having a really good running back is more important now than ever because of how defenses are adapting to the passing game. And all this talk of, ban 2 high safeties. That's a bunch of baloney. But if you have 2 high safeties, one of the easiest things you can do is be really successful in the run game and force them into a 1 high coverage because somebody's going to have to help stop the run. You keep gashing teams for 5-6 yards a carry, they're going to have to do something to adapt, and then you can take them over the top. Yep. Like, don't let the analytics people tell you that this, like, running the ball isn't a cure for 2 high safeties. It is if you're good at it, but you got to be good at it. And the Vikings weren't last year, mostly because their running backs weren't there. Ty Chandler is better this year than he was last year, but he wasn't ready. And he still, I don't think, is ready to be the alpha guy, which is fine. Not everybody is. But Alexander Madison just did not have the juice to be successful. Yep. And it wasn't to say he wasn't a good player. Jones is a souped up version of Madison. And that's the kind of juice that you need in order to be successful in this league. Yeah, so
pro.
Absolutely.
Age, let's get to those meat and potato questions for Forno here.
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to get your question asked on the show, email them to pdmeatandpotatoes@gmail.com or leave it in the comment section down below here on the Purple Daily YouTube channel. First one comes from Carson. He says, "Hey, Forno, love the insight. Can you break down what's made the Vikings so successful in the red zone, especially in last weekend? Last year, he remembers that he felt just so nervous when the offense would get close to the goal line because it kind of got congested, that he wasn't sure it's like a 50-50 type of thing they get in. He said Sam Darnold and KOC just made it look so easy. They went 4-4 in the red zone against the Texans. What has been the difference going from last year to this year?"
Running the ball. Honestly, if you can't run the ball, like what? Madison's your starting running back, had 0 rushing touchdowns last year. I think the team overall had 7. If you can't run the ball in the red zone, that's a problem because then they're just going to send a lighter box at you knowing that they can stop it, and they're going to focus on stopping the pass. Being able to have the ability to run the football and be able to put it in there. Plus, you have Darnold, who is making very quick decisions. The touchdown to Johnny Munt, they're running it out of bunch. So you got the 3 guys combined. And it's just a simple spacing concept. Like they're running like 5 yards and stopping in the zone. He sees Munt stop. There's nobody close to him, and he fires a piss missile. And if he fires that just like 2 feet off to the right, that's batted down. He gets it in there. He makes a very quick, concise decision and uses the arm talent to whip it in there. Like those are the kind of things that they're doing. And they're also being able to use spacing. They're getting better blocking up front. And having the weapon of the run game has made a really big difference, especially with those linebackers, because those linebackers can't just drop into a shell coverage. They have to worry about the threat of Aaron Jones in the red zone. And like that matters. That matters a lot, especially in those tight, condensed spaces, because a concept that you could run successfully at like the 50-yard line, it's a lot harder to run at the 10 because you only have 20 yards to work with rather than half the field.
Jeremy chimes in here. He says, "Hi, Sports Dad and Tyler. Love the show. I heard all week and early in the broadcast on Sunday about how C.J. Stroud was stingy with the ball, and he knows that the first pick was tipped, but he wants you guys to break down the defense on that second interception and what happened that may have fooled C.J. Stroud into getting picked off, a guy that, I mean, we heard it. It was the commentator's curse before that tip ball. I believe it was, I forget who had the first interception, but the second one later.
Hill.
Thank you. Later in the game, picked off again. Can you break down what happened there for Jeremy that maybe fooled C.J. Stroud a little bit?
Nothing happened, I think, defensively. He just missed. And every so often, even the great quarterbacks will just miss. He missed, and Cam Bynum made him pay. Like, there were a lot of things on defense where they were able to confuse him. They were able to show different looks and be able to move a lot post-snap. Because you show something pre-snap and you're able to do something different post-snap, that can confuse quarterbacks. And the second you have to think is the second you lose. You're going to hear me say that a lot. Thinking is from Monday afternoon when you start watching the game film until Sunday at noon. You don't think after Sunday at noon except when you're on the sidelines. If you're thinking on the field, you are doomed. You have to be able to read and react. So
he's overrated.
Yeah, thinking is for rich people. We don't need to do it.
Always said that, don't think.
I always go back to that interception that Josh Metellus had on Jordan Love at Lambeau Field last year. He ran Tampa 2. He was lined up in the A gap on the line of scrimmage at the snap and sprinted back and got the pick. That's the kind of deception that we normally see from Brian Flores. But that one, he had Collins open. He just missed him, and Bynum made him pay. And when a quarterback like that misses, you got to make him pay. You have to make those plays, and Bynum did. So there were plenty of plays where Stroud was confused, and they threw a bunch of different looks at him. But that was just, oopsies, I missed. You take it, you say thank you, and you make him pay with a touchdown, which I'm pretty sure the Vikings did.
Yeah, I think you are absolutely correct. Okay, so much football. Forno, tell folks where they can go to your own personal YouTube channel to get more of these type of breakdowns.
Absolutely. The Real Forno Show on Vikings First and Skol. We have stuff coming out nearly every single day. Oh, yeah. And my show, Monday, Wednesday nights, 6:05 Central Time. Jump on in. We go live and we interact with the comments. It's a good time. Otherwise, if you can't, just watch replay on YouTube or download the podcast. Give us 5 stars.
Awesome stuff, sir. All right. Vikings up, obviously playing the Packers at Lambeau Field on Sunday. We will be back next week to break it down. Judd, Forno, and AJ, so much football to come.